what Yaakov Avinu should have realized, an incredible thing, is first, since he subdued the angel of Esav, Esav is ready to do tshuva. First simon. Second, Esav came to kill him. What's he kissing him for? He's kissing me. There's a change of heart here. Something happened. He should have realized that Esav is ready to do tshuva because because he fought its balach and he won. But not only that, Esav admits on the blessings. Why is he admitting now? He should have seen all these as signs that Esav is about to do tshuva, but he didn't. Now we don't know why Yaakov didn't, but the Bereishis said you should have, and the taina against Yaakov was so great that unfortunately it brought tremendous sorrows to Yaakov because Dinah was forcibly taken and so on and so forth. But it's interesting, Osna still married Yosef later on. But we see an incredible thing. We see now what the Bereishis said. Of course I don't expect you to give your daughter to John Gotti. Of course not. But this man isn't John Gotti anymore. He's about to do tshuva because you just knocked out his angel. And the proof of that is he kissed you and it's not going to kill you. And not only that, he said to you, your blessings are yours. In any case, that was the taruma. So you see incredibly that if you know the hidden story, the answer is very simple. And not only that, we agree with the Rabbanu Shalom. Why Yaakov didn't do that is unknown. Maybe on the level of Yaakov, because who's going to talk about Yaakov? Even though we see clearly it was a sin, but we don't understand Yaakov's cheshbon. So we'll put that aside. In any case, we now understand why the Bereishis had complaints to Yaakov. Fine. What do we now see? That now Yosef takes over the job of Esav. Aha. Now, I want to tell you something. The brothers knew this. The brothers knew that Yosef had the power to subdue evil and that Yosef was connected to the Satan himself. Because that's what Esav is. A root soul is connected to the root of the satanic temptations itself. They knew that. And therefore they always looked at Yosef special. And that's why Yaakov loved Yosef. Because Yaakov was going to take over the job of a patriarch. That's why he loved Yosef. Not only that, but Yaakov Avinu said, listen, I know someday that he's going to go into the Sadeh. Because just like I had to go to where? Haran, he's got to go to Haran too. Or whichever nation is the residence of the Sultan. Which of course happened to be Egypt. He knew that. Yaakov knew that. Therefore Yaakov said, wait a minute. In order to prepare myself to go into this den of the Sultan in the house of Lovin, I've got to learn in yeshiva 14 more years. I've got to teach what I know to Yosef also. So that's why he taught everything he learned in Shem Be'eva. He had to teach it to Yosef because Yosef had the same job. That's why he didn't teach anybody else, but he had to teach it to Yosef because Yosef was going to do the exact same thing as Yaakov, which means go into a country and subdue evil. Fine. Now, the brothers knew this. But what happened? The brothers took a look at Yosef and they said, wait a minute, what's happening here? Here's a guy that's have dreams that's egocentric. It's like, what is this guy? This guy's incredibly arrogant. One, the dreams indicated arrogance on the part of Yosef. Because if this is what he dreams at night, that's probably what he's thinking in the day. So they looked at Yosef that he's falling into incredible arrogance. Not just arrogance, but what's called megalomania. Because he's got everybody bound to him, including his parents. That's the first thing they saw. The second thing they see is this guy's combing his hair. That's taiva. What's he into? What's he combing his hair for? He wants to be a pretty boy? What does it mean? So they look at him and say, wait a minute, this guy's into taiva. And then they see he's coming to Yaakov and talking Lashon Hara about them, and that's mirmo, that's deception. Who had those three characteristics? Who was a gaiva? Who was a fraud, a deceiver? And who was a tremendous baltaiva, pleasure? Esav. So they said, it's incredible. Yosef is turning into another Esav. What was wrong with Esav? Because Esav killed Avraham Avinu 5 years. Because somebody who has the soul of a patriarch can do what? Just like he can bring an incredible tikkun, he can do kilkul, he can destroy creation. So the brothers looked at Yosef as another beginning of Esav. You see, that's what they saw him. This is what's called a wannabe Esav. So they said, as a wannabe Esav, we got to get rid of this guy. Because this guy will destroy the Bria. And that's why the brothers wanted to kill him. Because they saw Yosef, who they knew had the neshama, like Esau, to fight the Sultan. But they saw him as falling to the Sultan, just like their great uncle, Esau. So they said, we have to get rid of him, or he's going to destroy the creation. The same concept that Yitzchak had, an unbelievable fear. That's why they wanted to kill him. But Yaakov knew that's not the case. So it says, Yaakov shomas adova. He observed the matter, right? Because he knew that Yosef had this neshama, that Yosef was a tzaddik, and he's going to go into an incredible land. And therefore, the Moshe made it that the brothers, of course, sold him, and he winds up in Egypt. Why didn't Yaakov Avinu know? It's funny. He knew he was going to go to Egypt. But the Moshe made sure that he would think he's dead. Why did the Moshe want to do that? Because the Moshe knew that the only way Klal Yisrael will survive in the exile is if I diminish the merit of the mitzvah of kibbud avayim of Esau. That's the only way they'll survive. Because the mitzvah of kibbud avayim Esau is so great that it will cause the Jews unbelievable tsuris. Therefore, I've got to diminish his merit. How? I've got to punish Yaakov for kibbud avayim. But how? So the Moshe did an incredible thing. Yaakov knew he was going to go into what's called the klipa, that Yosef was going to go into a land that was filled with Yetzer Hara and so on, temptations. But the Moshe said, he'll go, but you're going to think he's dead. Because Yosef will be absent from you 22 years, the same way you were absent from your father Yitzchak for 22 years. Mida keneged Mida, that was the kapora, you see. So the incredible, the Moshe concealed what Yaakov originally knew. But he had to conceal through this whole subterfuge, and he used the brother's desire to kill. Look how many things the Russian put together. Where Yosef goes to Egypt and does his job, withstands temptations, tremendous. Yaakov doesn't know, because Yaakov needs a kapara. So Yaakov is getting a kapara for 22 years, diminishes the merit of Esau, and that's how we survive. And it's interesting that the Chumash says that Yitzchak knew where Yosef was. Why didn't Yitzchak tell Yaakov? He sees his son grieving. He knew Beruach HaKodesh that Yosef was in Egypt. So why didn't he tell his son? Because Yitzchak knew that Yaakov needed the kapara. So he's not going to tell his son. As much as I heard him, he knew he needed the kapara for the sake of the Jewish nation. I'm not telling Yaakov. So Yaakov is sitting in Avelus. He's got his kapara, and Yosef goes to do his job. How the Rebbe arranges this is absolutely astounding. And nobody knows what's going on. What happens to the Yosef? Yosef goes to Egypt. What's the job of Yosef? To withstand the temptations like Esau. Where is the great nisoyan that Yosef had? Now clearly, a slave in Egypt was hefka. He could do whatever he wanted. Had all kinds of available taivas because he was a slave. And not only that, he was the head of Potiph's household, and the Egyptians were what's called shtufe zima. They were tremendously into zima, arayas, and all kinds of terrible things. Clearly, as the head of the household of Potiphar, he could have done anything he wants. Therefore, what the Roshim does, and that's good. Why? Because Yosef has to be tempted at the level of Esau. And therefore, he has all these temptations in that house. Now, what happens? The Roshim is now about to give him the ultimate test, Potiph's wife. Why is this the ultimate test? I had said before that many men are tempted this way. Fine, there's no question it's an act of tzidkus. But what is this act that Yosef did that because of that we call him Yosef HaTzadik? Listen to what the Torah does, and I will show you. In the narrative itself, it alludes to the hidden story. Yosef is in the house, right? Fine. And Potiphar he goes away because he's got his job to do. So the Torah says, Vayova Yosef abaisa, and Yosef comes to the house, lasis melachtoi, to do his job. The Torah is telling us is that I'm about to give Yosef the test of Esau, which is a Yetzer Hara, which is second to none. It is what's called a totally abnormal drive for a woman, which is absolutely mind-boggling, because the Satan is creating the drive, not his underling. Because that's the temptations of Esau. Yosef took over the job. He's got to have a drive which is unbelievable. Where do we see this? Take a look at how the Torah tells us. It says, Vayova Yosef, he goes to the house. Yosef goes to the house. Lasis melachtoi, to do his work. Now the normal meaning is to do his work because he was the head of the household. But mystically it means to do the work of Esau. And then it says, the Torah says, listen to this. It says, V'ein ish, and there was no man, me anshe habayis, from the household, shamba boyas, there in the house. That's what it says. And there was no man from the household in the house. That's redundant. It should have said this, V'ein ish, shamba boyas, and there was no man in the house. What do you mean there was no man of the household? The household there in the house. Leave out the word from the household. There was no man in the house. But listen to the way the Torah is saying. Now, follow this. The Torah says, V'ein ish, and there was no man from the household in the house. Yes? That means there was no man from the household. What's the implication? But there was another man. There was another man. It wasn't the household man, but there was another man. If the Torah wanted to tell you there was no man, it would have said, and there was no man there in the house. But it doesn't. It says, and there was no man of the household in the house. The implication is there was another man. Who was that man? Vayeovek ish imoy. And there was a man that fought with Yaakov. Who was that? The Satan. The Torah tells you that the Satan was in the house. That the job that Yosef is about to do is at the level of a Satan's temptation. Why? Because that is the job that he has to do. So the Torah actually alludes to the story, the hidden story, mystically, by telling you that there was no man of the household there, but there was another man. Which man? That man that fought with Jacob, Yaakov, Vayeove Ishimoy, and there fought a man who we know is who we know is the angel of Esav, Satan himself. So the Torah actually tells you that you are now looking at the equivalent of Yaakov fighting the Malach in terms of the incredible Nisayan, and you are looking at the equivalent of the job of Esav. This is the big moment that Yosef has to win in order to destroy Esav. Does Yosef do it? Yes. He withstands the temptation, but it wasn't the normal temptation. It was an abnormal drive, which he withstood. Therefore, the Torah says, you did the job of Esav, and because of that, he's called Yosef HaTzadik. That was the job. But what happens, of course, he is taken and thrown into prison to go even further into the dungeon. Now, Yosef, of course, remains and so on in prison. Fine. Now, let's take a look. All of a sudden, Pharaoh has a dream. Pharaoh's got a dream, right? He needs an interpreter, correct? Who's he going to interpret? Well, the wine guy tells him, hey, he tells him the story, the interpreting the dream and so on, and that there's a guy in prison, he's great at interpreting dreams. Fine. He can interpret your dream. And Pare knew that nobody was interpreting because it says he dreamt not only the dream but the interpretation also. So he couldn't fool him with all the interpretations and so on. So Paro decides to call Yosef. So in one day, Yosef goes from the lowest social class in Egypt, which is a prisoner, to the highest social class, which is standing in front of Pharaoh. Now, he says to him, he tells him the dream, and Yosef interprets it. What's the meaning? Before we understand this, who or what caused the dreams of Parai? Now, if I ask you, how did Yosef get out of prison? What would you answer me? You say, boy, was he lucky that he dreamt, right, that there was going to be a famine. God revealed the concept that there was going to be a famine into Parai in the form of a dream, and Yosef had the incredible ability to interpret it. Correct? What incredible luck how he got out of prison. But the question is, why was there going to be a famine? Now take a look what the story is and how a tzaddik gets out of prison. Two ways to get out of prison. You can bribe the jailer, you can petition the court. Tzaddikim don't need that. Here's what a tzaddik does. And you begin to understand how Yosef did it. What Yosef does, wherein lies the power of Egypt? The answer is that's the Satan. Because the Satan, remember I said that if a person withstands the temptations of the Satan, then the divine energies goes to that person. It weakens the Satan, and the Satan becomes very weak. So his tentacles become weak, the Zoyamah, and all of a sudden the nation becomes very weak. When Yosef withstood all the temptations, what happens is he took back all the holiness away from the Satan back to the side of holiness. So the Satan is what? the Sultan's starving. The Sultan has nothing to eat. If the Sultan is starving, it means he's weak. If the Sultan is starving, that means the nation that he represents is also starving. That's the famine. Yosef caused the famine. Incredible, isn't it? Because when a tzaddik withstands nisoyin, temptations, he depletes the energy of the Sultan. And since the nation is empowered by the Sultan, if the Sultan is depleted, so is Egypt. The Sultan starves, so does the nation of Egypt, and they starve in the same way that the Sultan does, which is in the concept of the 7 spheres. Therefore, there are 7 years of famine. In any case, therefore, Yosef created a famine. That famine then, of course, comes to Paro, and Paro has the dream. Now, if that's the case, I asked you a question, because he interpreted the dream, he becomes the Grand Vizier? That's ridiculous. He should have just paid him his fee, and that's the end of it. But what do you make him Grand Vizier for? Because I will tell you a very important concept. If you want to understand where is the balance between these divine energies, the Kedusha, is it in the hands of Jews, or is it in the hands of the Sultan? What do you look at? You look here to see the relationship between Klal Yisrael and the Ummah Ha'olam, and the nations of the world. When Yosef withstood the temptations, Potiphar's wife and everything else, what he did is he starved the Sultan. Therefore Egypt starved. Pharaoh dreamt about the upcoming starvation, so Pharaoh calls the very man that did it, unknowing, right? He calls Yosef. Yosef is standing in front of Pharaoh, but wait a minute. In the heavens, what is the relationship between the Sultan and Klal Yisrael? The answer is that almost all the Kedusha is back in the hands of the Jews. If that's the case, then how can a Jew be a slave to Paro? The Jew must equal the level of Kedusha in the hands of the Jews. Therefore, Yosef must be elevated right on the Paro, because the Kedusha is almost all in the hands of Klal Yisrael. You see, it's an incredible thing. Therefore, Paro had no choice. He had to make him Grand Vizier, because Yosef's standing in heaven is right under the Sultan. That's how close he is to bringing them down. Therefore, Paro has no choice but to elevate Yosef as the Grand Vizier. Imagine that. A tzaddik gets himself out of prison, but not only that, he gets himself an incredible job. Do you imagine? Because of the nisoyin that he does, because the tzaddik doesn't interface with the world at this level, he interfaces with up there. And if you interface and you disturb the balances up there, automatically this world must reflect the standing of Klal Yisrael, or the standing or the balance of the Kedusha up there. Therefore Yosef is elevated. In fact, even Paro said that. Is there anybody, Asher Ruach Elokim Boy? Is there anybody like you that the Spirit of God is not in him? Ruach Elokim, by the way, means Mashiach. Because in the beginning of the Torah it says, the Ruach Elokim Rachefes Apnei Hamoyim. And the Spirit of God hovered over the face of the waters. Who is the Spirit of God? So the Baal HaTurim says that the gematria of Ruach Elokim Rachefes is the gematria Zuhi Ruchoi Shel Melech HaMoshiach. It's the same gematria. So Paro calls him Ruach Elokim. Is there anybody in which the Spirit of God, is there anybody else that has this kind of spirit than you? He's actually saying to Yosef that you have this spirit. But he doesn't even realize what he's saying. So Yosef is out of prison. Fine. Now Yosef does not tell his father. Why? Because he knows his father needs a kapora of kibbud ova'im. Okay, great. What happens now? And I'm finished very shortly. What happens now? Yosef finally, after all the years, he goes and tells, and he has the whole story with the sons and Binyamin. He takes Binyamin and whatever. He finally reveals himself to his brothers, and he says, Ani Yosef, which by the way is what the Mashiach will do, because nobody knows who the Mashiach is. He looks like some Grand Vizier or whatever, and all of a sudden the Mashiach says to Klal Yisrael, Ani Yosef, I'm the Mashiach. And they all look at him, huh? It's incredible. That's the remez, how the Mashiach reveals himself to Klal Yisrael, which tells us that the Mashiach is a person, he's the last guy you expect to be the Mashiach. Because the way Yosef revealed himself is the way Mashiach ben Yosef will reveal himself. That was an interesting aside. In any case, So all of a sudden, he sends to Yaakov, but what does he send him? So Yosef, it says that Yosef prepared the chariot. Yosef himself prepared the chariot that would go to Yaakov. Why did he prepare the chariot? Because Yosef knew that the whole reason why Yaakov was punished because he had to have a kapara, an atonement for kibbud of aim. So he wasn't going to do that again. So what he did is he himself prepared the chariot, even though he's the grand vizier, as kibbud of aim. What happens? Then all of a sudden they go to tell Yaakov, and Yaakov realizes an incredible thing. Yosef lives. That is absolutely unbelievable. Oy Yosef Chai, which is a very important concept because the Mashiach ben Yosef will live and won't die, as it says in the Gemara. In any case, so Yaakov Vinu says, Oy Yosef Chai, my son lives, and therefore I want to go and see him. So Yaakov Avinu now goes to Yosef. And there's a very interesting medrash. It says when Yaakov Avinu saw Yosef, right, Yosef broke out into crying. Could you imagine the love that they had between each other? So Yosef is crying. And Yaakov Avinu wasn't crying. Because it says, and Yosef was crying. What was Yaakov doing? So the Medrash says, he was saying Kriya Shema. He was saying Shema Yisrael. So here, imagine the scene. Father and son get together after 22 years. But it wasn't just a relationship. You could imagine what Yaakov Avinu felt toward Yosef. Okay? And Yosef is crying, and his father is reciting Kriya Shema. What a strange sight here. Why was he crying? And why was he saying Kriya Shema? So the fact that Yosef is crying, we can understand. That's that's normal reaction. Why wasn't Yaakov crying? And the answer is, the Baalei Musa give this interpretation. Because Yaakov had an unbelievable simcha, joy, and he wanted to use this joy for God's sake. So he would use this joy in reciting Kriya Shema. What a level of Kriya Shema. Could you imagine saying Kriya Shema with an unbelievable level of joy? Fine, that's the Baalei Musa. However, the Pshat you can learn differently. What is the Pshat, not the Musa of the story? Why was Yaakov Avinu saying Kriya Shema? And this, in the end, is a very important lesson to all of us. Yaakov Avinu, when he saw Yosef, was astonished. What was his astonishment? He said, this is incredible. I thought that Yosef was dead, so I was sitting Avedis for all these years. I was a mourner, right? Then you had the story of Yehuda and Tamar. That was the fall of Yehuda. Then all of a sudden Shimon is gone and Binyamin is gone and Yosef is killed. I thought I was a goner. I thought everything, that the whole concept of Klal Yisrael diminished, and I thought that I would never live to see my family intact. What do I see? Not only is Yosef is alive, Binyamin is back, Shimon is back, and I'm not a mourner because he's alive. And Yehuda is here, and he's setting up a yeshiva. Could you imagine that literally Yaakov saw? It's incredible that my depression and despair has gone from the depths to the unbelievable pinnacle of simcha. Who caused this? What kind of a being can fool all of us? Fool me, fool Yehuda, fool Binyamin, Shimon, and Yosef. And not only that, not only fool all of us, but in the reason for his fooling, as none of us should know, because each of us have to do their own individual jobs, and the whole thing comes out to an unbelievable tikkun, because Yosef restored the Kedusha back in the hands of Klal Yisrael, and that's why he's the Grand Vizier. So he realized an incredible thing, that God not only is the only being that exists, one, that what's called Yichud Mitzvusoi, that the Rebbe is the only being that is. We all emanate. And not only is the Rebbe Yichud Shlitosoi, that the Rebbe is the only koyach in the Bria. He's the only one that can do anything, he's the only cause. But the also Yichud Hanhagosoi, that everything that happens in creation can only move if God said, I want this to move. So he realized the absolute supremacy and control that God has over every aspect of creation. That God can fool everybody. Everybody. Yet in the fooling, and make everybody be utterly despaired. Yet in the despair and the darkness is the very Geula itself. Only the version can do that. So he says, listen. He says, Shema Yisrael, hear O Israel, Hashem Elokeinu, the Lord our God, Hashem Echad, God is one. He is the absolute one in terms of his being, in terms of his cause, his control, his cause, and in terms of his directorship. That's what he said. In other words, at the moment he saw Yosef, he realized an incredible hasaga, because it fell into place that I'm back with all my family, and the whole reason why God concealed all of us. I had to do kibbut of aim, a kapara. Yosef had to remove the kedusha from Egypt. Each one had to do their own thing, and none of us knew. Talk about the abilities of God himself. And he said, Shema Yisrael, that the Rebbeinu Shalom is one, that the entire direction of creation is only because of the Rebbeinu Shalom. And this is what Yaakov Avinu, and what statement encapsulates that concept? Shema Yisrael. Echad. So of course Yosef was crying, because of course that's the emotion. But Yaakov Avinu, being who he was, he saw the incredible Musa Haskell of this, that was so unbelievable that it just removed, it subdued the crying into an unbelievable concept and hasaga. And he voiced the hasaga, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, because I see the unbelievable yichud hanhogosoi of God. And that's why he was saying Shema. What do we see all this? We see very interesting. We have come to the end of the story, right? We have seen an incredible thing. It's a different story that we learn all the time. Could you imagine? How many years have you been learning Bereishis? This is a completely different story. It's about a story of who Adam is and who Avram is. The whole concept of Mashiach ben David ben Yosef. The concept that Jews have two tikkun processes. And the whole concept of who Esav is as a failed of. And then there's a contingency plan where Yaakov has to take it over. And he can't do the whole thing, so he gives it over to Yosef. And it's a story of what the Torah describes as the test of the angel that Yaakov fought with the Malach is really the test of Yaakov, the supreme test, and the test of Yosef with the Fatif Zayif. This is a different story. What do we see? That the Chumash is an incredible sefer, and only God can write it. You can learn the Chumash on one level, and that's kids. 5-year-old kid can learn Chumash. A 15-year-old can learn Chumash at a different level. And then, of course, an Adam Choshev can learn it, a Godel can learn it, a Makubal can learn it. It doesn't make a difference. Each different, the Chumash, and the incredible thing is how can God use the same narrative to describe every level? Because the words don't change, yet the narrative reveals every single level. As I showed you, and there was no man of the household there, but there was another man. In that 2 words, Anshe Abayis reveals the whole story or the whole significance of the story of Fatifa's wife and Yosef. In any case, this is what we see about the Chumash. That is incredible multi-layered hasagas and stories. And the second thing I want to leave you with is the kasog of Yaakov Avinu. Could you imagine what he understood? Don't worry. Of course he was sitting in despair. Can you imagine a man 22 years thinks his son is dead. And if his son is dead, there's no Yud Bei Shvatim. There's no 12 tribes. And if there's no 12 tribes, Yaakov Avinu cannot be enough. Because in order for him to be a patriarch, the level, he must have 12 tribes. There's no 12 tribes. So Yaakov Avinu thought Yosef was dead. He isn't the patriarch. Therefore, never get Ulam Haba, which is what what says, I thought I was lost. Everything was gone. Everything was lost. And in the end, not only was nothing lost, it had actually did the tikkun and brought the gula. So therefore we take a look around us, this Oslo, the insanity called Oslo, right? We see the terrible matzav in Klal Yisrael. So we ask the Rebbeinu Shalom, where is God? How could the Rebbeinu Shalom have abandoned us, right? To the Arabs. He has abandoned us to the government, which have no comprehension of what is in front of them, that the Arabs mean to destroy the Jews, because that's their theological necessity. And they'll never change, because peace is nothing more than the first stage of war. How can we be subject to so many people? How can clients will have so many tsuras and so on? So many people die, whether it be here in America, right? And what do we all do? We sit in darkness and we despair, and we say that the Rebbeinu Shalom has abandoned us. So therefore, I tell you the message of Yaakov, that the entire thing we see is nothing more than the messianic process, except it must go through darkness in order to happen. Just like Yaakov and all the people, Yosef, he thought he was finished because he was a slave. How in the world does a slave in Egypt ever get out of prison, let alone become a grand vizier? Everybody was in the dumps. Yet it was the dumps that got him out, that ultimately did the Gula. This is what we have to understand. That's a very important lesson. So therefore, from this concept, I have sort of like spoken about the hidden story of Bereishis, from its beginning to its end. I have left out a great deal of information. Let me tell you that, because this whole story is 17 cassettes long. I left out a lot of stuff. But the fundamental ideas are here, and those ideas are sufficient in order to see the entire panorama of the story. And that's very important. That Chumash is an incredible sefer. And the second concept is, let's be like Yaakov Avinu, that says Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. That in truth, all that which goes on ultimately is for the sake of Klal Yisrael, and ultimately when the time comes, all of it. And then guess what? All of us will say at that point, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Thank you.